Díobh Gaeilge agus fáilte romh hig agran romansúil de Lá Fhéile Bite-Size Irish. Hello and welcome to a very romantic episode of the Bite-Size Irish podcast. It's Misha Neil.
It's Misha Emma.
But don't worry, there's no need to call the parish priest. All it is that we are going to discuss a few topics around an gra agus an Gaeilge. Of course, it being St. Valentine's Day in just a couple of days' time. So, Emma, what's your ray?
Araglin.
Araglin. So, Istocha and Hiedra de Gaeilge is that we'd like to talk about some simple terms of love that you might use with your romantic partner, but also with other people that you love in your life, and very much including your dogs and cats and so on too. But for these terms, we do already have a ceacht, a lesson in Ashter in our online learning platform. So that is in our Tus Mai course, our introductory course for beginners of Irish. And the particular lesson is called Talking About Love. It's in one of the early modules, I think, about friends and family and so on. So you'll find a lot more info in there about how to talk about love and so on. But just to mention a few of these terms, there's some very common ones that we would know, that we would use an awful lot. Ones that occurred to me would be terms like a gra, a store, a hashka, a chri. These are all terms that I would use from time to time myself. A gra, a store, a hashka, a chri. Gra is love, of course. Store and tashka both mean like treasure, my treasure. Agus chri, that is heart, of course. Would you use any of these terms yourself, Emma, or would you use any other ones?
I'd use a store myself, definitely. And the other one that I really like is a fata or pet, as Béarla. I really like that. I find that you can use it with everyone. It's just a really nice term of endearment, a blanket term. And it can be thought of romantically, but also said to just even a randomer, on the street. Are you okay?
Oh, yeah.
Need this pet? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one then, a chuisle mo chrí, so the pulse of my heart. So I think a lot of people know this. You'll hear people refer to it, I think. But yeah, a fata, a chuisle mo chrí, and a store. They're nice.
With your ones, yeah. I love a chuisle mo chrí as well. It's the pulse of my heart. We're getting a bit poetic there, but more to come of that later. So a chuisle mo chrí. Agus Brotherwine, Le Feic Gaeilge show, something we can see is a fata, a chuisle, a gra, a store, a hashka, a chrí. This is antishal garamach, isn't it? This is the vocative case. So why do we use a here, but we don't use ma? You don't say my love, my heart.
It's because you're addressing the person, and this can be used even when you're using someone's name. So if someone writes an email to me, they'll say a Emma, a chara. So it's kind of, I suppose you could translate it roughly to English as oh love, oh Emma. But that sounds a bit strange in English, but that's how you would address someone in Irish.
It's a bit old-fashioned in English, isn't it, though? It is in romance poetry and songs and so on. Of course, it's all over that. So it's just the style of the language, really, folks. I think a lot of people, a lot of learners sort of want to translate directly and say, my love, my sweetheart. But we don't want ma, we should say a gra, a store, a hashka, a chrí, and you are saying that, you are expressing that. So that's a little tip for you. Carcalor. So Anish, from these termi, from these love terms, we're going to go on to Shanakal, which is always a favorite topic. And Shanakals do indeed have a lot to say about love as well. I'm going to show your first Shanakal here that you've chosen, Emma. Could you tell us what this one is all about? What does it mean?
Well, I actually was looking for a suitable Shanakal for a friend's wedding last year. So I wanted to write something in the card, ask Gaeilge. I always try and make an effort there. And I think this is just a really nice one. So níl lais an rá ach pósa. So there's no cure for love but marriage. So, you know, there's no other way to go other than marry the one you love. I really like it. It's simple and it's easy to remember as well. Some of them, some seanachal are quite long, I find, and I can't remember the wording, but this is nice and straightforward. There's no cure for love but marriage.
Okay, so that's quite a positive reading of that, because I know this one too, and I've often thought, you know, it's marriage that's going to get rid of the love. It's going to cure the love, like that.
Yeah,
you could read it in a kind of cynical way too.
True, yeah. I looked at it as positive. You know, you're sick with love almost. How do I don't know,
how do you cure the sickness?
Yeah, that's how I looked at it. So
I think you can read it both ways, and later on we're going to be talking about a song, which again I think you can read two totally different ways as well. So I think that's valid. Another one that you made me think of with that is this one that I really like. Love as a sickness, which doesn't sound the most positive, but this just makes me laugh, this one. Galar gan naire, tart agus gra. Galar gan naire, tart agus gra. So galar gan naire, a disease without shame. Tart agus gra, thirst and love. So it's two examples of diseases which have no shame. Whether it's thirst for presumably alcohol, people will make a fool of themselves and do anything they can to get a drink, but also love. You'll make a fool of yourself and do whatever you can to find love. And it just makes me smile that it's such a, I wouldn't say bleak, but it's not a very rose-tinted view of life. Yeah, gan naire, without shame. But I think that's all right. Gra should be without shame. Yeah. Okay, agus tá ceanna eile agat sa an seo. So
yeah, nice segue to my one. Galar an gra nach leisen livena. So again, love is a disease. Galar an gra nach leisen livena. That doesn't heal herbs even. Or do you have a better translation for me?
That herbs don't heal.
That herbs don't heal. Yeah, other way around. That herbs don't heal. So, you know, if you disregard, you know, níl lais an rá ach pósa, they're not even saying that marriage could cure. So and I suppose, yeah, once you're in love with someone, there's not much you can do to fall out of love with them, I suppose. Do you know what I mean? Unless something terrible happens. And sometimes that's good. Other times, you know, you might have instances of unrequited love, which again comes up later, that you can't really do anything about. So,
well, I suppose you could say it feels like a sickness, and you know, if you're in love with someone, or if it's unrequited love, or if you don't know how they feel, it feels like a kind of a sickness. But going to the doctor won't help.
Yeah,
you know, going to the pharmacist won't help. But maybe what you need to do is go to the person and find a different cure for that. Maybe you need to go and get married. Or declare your love, or write some poetry. So Canella Tarenha Ugamsa, another one that I've chosen. Tashe simply, because Tashe good jazz. It's simple, it's very sweet and nice. Ni baha ganra. Ni baha ganra. There's no life without love. So Shine. Good jazz simply. Yeah. I feel like the Beatles could have come up with that one, you know. Ni baha gan ra. So that's a nice, simple one. You know, that's short enough to put in a tattoo, if anyone's keen on that. Ceart galore. So shin couple of seanachal dív, majala cursi gra, couple of proverbs, old traditional proverbs about matters of love. Achanish tamjkan lorch fui iliacht. We're going to talk about some love poetry. And I'm going to start because I found one that's very old. In fact, it's from the 9th or 10th century. So it is from Old Irish, Sean Gaeilge. And here it is. We can put the whole thing on the screen for you. Very short, just a few syllables, really. And I'll read it in the best Old Irish pronunciation I can do, but it's been a while since I've studied Old Irish. But it is Crithe é, Dara Kno, Ogan é, Pogan do. So in modern Irish, that would be Crí é, is Crí é. He's a heart. Dara Kno, so a nut grove. Dara is a grove of trees, and Kno is nut, so a nut grove. Ogan é, he's a young man. Pogan do, a wee kiss for him. Pogan. So it could be a little poem of love, romantic poem, but it occurs to me it could be if you have a baby son or something, if he's your wee darling, you know, you could be saying it to him as well. But I think it works equally both ways like that. So that's a little bit of Old Irish poetry, and there's a few familiar words in there. The words have changed a lot over the years, but there's a few things that we can recognize. Og and pog for young and for kiss are in there for sure. Carcalor. Emma, you've chosen one from, is it the classical Irish period or early modern Irish period?
Yeah, it would be. So I first came, this first came to light for me a few years ago during my master's when we were doing Gaelic literature, and Shahroon Keating or Geoffrey Keating came up. And I'd always heard about him. People might recognise him from A History of Ireland for his Fasa Éireann. But later in his life, Bahagart he was a priest. So later in his life, he apparently wrote this love poem. And it was a bit of a scandal because he was a priest. And the English translation of Avan Lawn the Stuim, the name of the poem, is O Woman Full of Wiles. And if you read the poem, you can see he describes the woman, but he also describes himself. Actually, he starts off by describing himself. So I'll just give you a little piece of it. So Fech lia dem old fech churp, fech mo churp gan lu, fech reach dem ul, cred re will to hnu. So my hair has fallen out, my blood has turned to dust, my body's lost its youth. Is it after this you lust? So he's describing himself, and now he's an old man, and he's kind of pining after a woman. And later then she's described as having beautiful hair and beautiful eyes, so on and so forth. So it was kind of scandalous for a priest to be writing such such a poem. You know, these words shouldn't be coming out of a priest's mouth, celibacy and the rest of it. So I quite like it. It's very interesting, and it's not your typical poem. Usually, you know, I'm either you describe the person who you love, and you never really describe yourself fully, physically. You often just hear, you know, I'm sick with love and what I never deserve you, something like that. But he really goes in on himself as well, and you get an image for what he looks like, or his view of himself. It's a bit sad as well, I think. To read. Well,
I think it's kind of in the nature of romantic poetry and songs and romanticism in general that you don't get much realism in there. It's a lot of fantasy visions, and that's what the feelings are like, Beijer. You know, oh baby, you are so amazing in every way. This kind of thing, but you don't always get a very realistic portrait of either person. So that's interesting, even though he's painting a picture of himself as not being a complete catch, let's say. But that it gives it a different angle. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And we will put a link to this poem below. So check that out, folks, if you're interested. We'd recommend that. Good jazz. And is that from the 17th, 18th century? Do you know?
I don't have the exact date on me now, but 1800s. So mid 18 or early around that date. We can fact check it and add it in.
So it's a few hundred years ago, and I'm going to bring us more up to date with a poem by one of our greatest poets of the modern age, Nuala ní Dhomhnaill. So Nuala definitely writes about love and sex and just pleasure in that side of life. And this is one poem that's very nice. It's called Lá Fhéile, which means a bed of silk, a silken bed, which sounds very romantic. But it's actually a place name over in County Clare. So I kind of imagine that Nuala came to that place and was visiting or something, and she saw the place name and she thought, oh, well, this feels very romantic place name. So in the poem, she's saying, I'd make a bed for you. She's talking to her lover saying, I'd make a lovely bed for you. And she's talking about the nature and in the long grass and things like that, flowers and so on. And she's talking about her lover and how they would be Gaeilge or Gaeilge. I suppose they're limbs on limbs wrestling as the moths settle at night. So there's no doubt what she's talking about, but she just paints a picture, very romantic, of this bed she would make for her lover in Lá Fhéile. So very appropriate for Lá Fhéile Vailintín is Dócha. And that's Nuala ní Dhomhnaill. Again, I'd recommend everybody buy a book or two of Nuala's because she's fantastic. Agus anish, so sin an iliocht, that's the poetry. Anish támuid a kind faoi órainn ra, love songs. Agus bhí muid a kind faoi seo, we were talking about this, and it's actually quite hard to find a happy love song. So we've got a few examples, but they're all a little bit conflicted, or they could be read a couple of ways. Cad faoi tá cúpla sampla agus cad faoi gra gan chúteamh.
Yeah, we'll start with the most depressing one, Grog an Cúteamh. So sin unrequited love. So we mentioned that earlier on. And this is definitely not the only one that exists, but there's a song called Dóna Lóg. And I remember I studied this in university in my bachelor degree. And it is quite famous, quite popular. A lot of people would know of it, perhaps not know it off by heart. I don't. But it's sad. It's a sad song, and it's about essentially a woman who is pining after a man who left her and who either didn't love her or, did but went away, and he went abroad and he left. And it's not the most beautiful. And I suppose I'm not feeling happy when I read it, and I know we should all be happy on Valentine's Day. But again, is scholar on Grog?
No.
Yeah,
I think that's part of Valentine's Day. There's some of us in happy relationships, and then there's other people who are pining away on Valentine's Day, and it just reminds you.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the whole picture. Myself.
Yeah. So that's Dóna Lóg, young Donal. Some people do say that it's also political. That one of the people that left was a fighter, and it's from the 18th century, so it could happen. But it also comes up in Scottish tradition. So I believe that we don't know who actually. It's anonymous as far as I know. And it does go back, and I think Lady Gregory did a translation of it at some point too. But
it's often said, isn't it, that the old love poetry, and really they were talking about this beautiful woman. Really, she was Ireland, and it was all about that.
Exactly. There's a whole genre of that as well. So I found conflicting dates, and I didn't look into it enough. But some people say it's 18th century. Other people are saying it's 8th century. But I'd have to double check it. But either way, it's been well translated and well documented, and it's a good one.
Okay, and I have one now that I think a lot of people will know. Seo Casabh Thugain. There's been a lot of famous versions of this. Iarla or Leonard, great singer, he does this one quite a lot. Michael O'Donnell did a great version back in the 70s or 80s too. Casabh Thugain is literally the twisting of the rope, the twisting of the hair rope, and I think it's unrequited love too. It's about a fella who's coming to a house to court the daughter of the house, and the mother asks him, will he help her twisting this rope? But of course, as they're making the rope, he has to step backwards and backwards, and of course he's backing out of the house, so they get rid of him. And lad bocht. But the chorus just sounds very romantic. It could sound like it's just a lovely romantic chorus when he says, "Ma vin tulium bilium," you know, if you be with me, be with me. You know, so it's a very famous chorus, and it is beautiful. I'm sure you know that one, Emma.
I do, and I believe that we have a video on YouTube. Siobhan did it, translation of it, or not a translation, but more so pronunciation of how to say video. So we can link that below also if you'd like to have a look at it. She also translates it and goes through it line by line. But it's a beautiful song. It was in Iarla sang it in Brooklyn, didn't he? That the movie with Saoirse Ronan in it. The scene where they're at Christmas time, where they're all in the hall, he stands up and sings that song, as far as I remember.
I think it's one of those ones where, folks, if you don't recognize the title, when you hear the tune, you'll think, yes, this one. And it is lovely. So another one you've chosen is Halin Aling. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, a Halin Aling. So, oh, beautiful girl, or oh, lovely girl, whatever way you want to translate it. I love this. I've always loved this. I think it's simple, but again, a little bit tragic. What's an Irish song without a little bit of tragedy? So, you know, a Halin Aling, tá Halin Aling a hug me grade. So there's a beautiful girl who I gave my love. She's more beautiful and lovelier than a blade and a flower, no rose or a rose. But without her, I'm weak. And the last line of the first stanza is, "Oh, Halin Aling is to fa mo vroin." So, oh, beautiful girl, you're the cause of my sadness or my grief. Yeah, blame her.
Yeah, it's her fault, isn't it? Yeah.
Sounds like a new problem. But I really like it. The tune is just really, I don't know why I'm so drawn to it, but I always was since a younger age. And I like to play it on the tin whistle there in Adog Stone fresh, and it's straightforward enough that I can do it on the tin whistle as well. It's
nice. Michael Lore, I don't know that one, so I'm going to have to check it out. Looking forward to that. But I've chosen another one, which I think is very well known to Tamachlaunis Genta. And I first heard this one from the album that Van Morrison made with the Chieftains. Maybe that was the start of the 1990s. It was a big CD in our kitchen for many years. Tamachlaunis Genta. And Clownus, folks, is what it's translated into English is "my match is made." So it's talking about matchmaking, about arranged marriages, which is possibly not what you think of as romantic. But it's also not what the singer of the song, the narrator, thinks is romantic either. It sort of starts in media res, as they say. It's in the middle of the action, and he says, "My match was made last night to a girl I neither love nor like." And he decides to take off. So he's been matched to someone he doesn't want to get married to. And he takes off wandering the whole country. And you think, well, what's going on in this song? But in the last verse, he hears word, and he kind of attributes it to the birds. The little birds are singing, and he hears word that his love has crossed the ocean. And you think, oh, his true love has been away these years, and maybe she has returned. I think you could also read it. It's often performed bilingually, this song, as a duet with Irish and English alternating verses. But in the Irish, you could read it that his love, his one true love, has already gone away across the ocean, as in away from here. So maybe she's off in America or somewhere, and he's just lost. But I think you can also read it that she has crossed the ocean, as in maybe she's returned. And I like to think of it like that maybe she has returned. The tune, it's not quite as minor key heartbreaking as some of the other songs. So I like to think there's a bit of hope here. But it's an interesting shape of a song, because it's someone who, at the beginning of the story, we kind of start in the middle of the story. He's been engaged to someone he doesn't like, and he takes off, and then he hears that maybe his love has returned. Okay, but we don't actually see the two women or the other characters at all.
Mm.
So Tamachlanas Janta. And of course, there was a TG Cahir show called Clowness a few years ago. Do you remember that one, Emma?
I recognize the name, but I never watched it. No.
It was kind of hilarious. It was an Irish dating show, Irish language dating show.
Yeah.
But the trick that they had was that it was your mother who was choosing the girl for you or choosing the boy for you. So they got people on with their mother, and the mother had to make the final choice.
Wow.
So that's hilarious, really.
I like it. Good idea. I might have to tune into that again myself now. On the player.
It was a very Irish take on the dating TV show. So ta Oranella Ugatsanish Bandu Lana.
Yeah, Ronella. Now, I have to say, I'm not going to lie. I was doing my research for this episode. So I was trying to see, you know, when Niall said, okay, Emma, we're going to do it on Graw, we need this. Sure, of course, every Shanukal, every song that I know about Graw went out of my head. So I had to do my own research again and remind myself what exists. And the on tune agum, I knew the tune of this song, but I never knew the name. I never knew that there was lyrics. Often you hear the you know, it just performed musically and never get the actual words to it, so on and so forth. So I did a little bit of digging, and I came upon this again. And there's a great website, joeheaney.org, and there's a collection of stories and songs sang by Joseph O'Haney, who was from Carna. And what I like is they have the full recording of him explaining the song and also then singing the song. And it's called Band of Glana, or The Dark-Haired Woman of the Glen. And to quote what Joe says, he says, she was a beautiful woman and she could very hardly be reached by somebody who was poor. All they could do was stare at her all the time. And she made him sick, so sick that he was in love. And you know what love is, that my grandmother said, quote, love is blind and marriage is an eye-opener. So I liked his little intro to it there. And I was reading the lyrics, and again, I listened to, there's a beautiful version with just an instrumental version by the chamber orchestra and Liam O'Flynn. He's on the uilleann pipes. It's gorgeous. It's really, really, it makes me feel some sort of way. And in the song itself, then he says that he's bringing his cows on the hillside and he's driving them wherever they need, but I've lost my senses, and when I look across to the place where my love lies, my eyes fill with tears. Bright king of the elements, resolve my predicament. The dark woman of the glen has destroyed me. So I'm in on the depressing side of the love songs. Sorry, everyone, but but when Joe Heaney sings it, and as we link it below, the way he sings it is just gorgeous. And I've heard other versions. Where Nick Gaeilge does a lovely version as well, but Joe Heaney's one, I don't know why, it's caught me, and it's just sean-nós and there's no music with it. It's just his voice. And I think that makes it even more powerful. Although I love the version without words and with the uilleann pipes and that, his version just with his voice even makes it a little bit more heartbreaking to listen to.
That's so interesting that you could really love a purely instrumental version, but then you love the a cappella version as well. So yeah, I don't know this song myself. I'm dying to hear it.
You have to listen to it. It's really the instrumental would remind you of, in my mind when I first heard it, it would remind you of just, you'd see the hills of Ireland and, these really dramatic pan shots of the coastline of Ireland. And, I live abroad, so I suppose I felt more drawn home. It made me more, maybe a bit homesick listening to it. But yeah, it's a beautiful song, sung beautifully, although the lyrics again are heartbreaking, but very nice.
And Joe Haney, of course, one of the big names in sean-nós singing from Connemara, and a really big figure. So we'll link his website too there. So to Oranella Ranha Ugam, the last one of the songs, and it is, I thought we'll get something that's a bit more positive if we can finish on a more positive note. So Pegging litcher more. The thing is, though, as we said about some of those terms of endearment, like a chushla, a chrí, a fatta, is that it's not necessarily romantic love here, but maybe more familial love. Because pegging litcher more, I think it sounds like it's the point of view of a parent who love their little darling girl, Peggy litcher more. In the lyrics, it's we've got, you know, Míle gra le manami, you know, Míle gra, 1,000 loves with my soul for Peggy litcher more, and ta bríd agam is ta catch agam, she peg and vanis far. I have breed and I have catch, but Peggy is the best of all. So hopefully not comparing our children there, that'd be terrible. But no. It does say per beit far yoasi nacher aveyasanta. Whichever man wins her hand, whichever man will get her, isn't he a lucky fella? So it's not. It doesn't sound like somebody who wants to fall in love with her. Or maybe it's just somebody unattainable. Again, you know, maybe that's it. But it's clearly just praising pegging to the skies. So it's lovely and it's a nice, jolly tune as well. So it's my lamshin. So anish, Bawailen Lord fi couple of scale modulation ra, couple of love stories in a sense, or a couple of other tidbits. Agus an chedrad na toriacht Iermada agus Rania. A lot of people might be familiar with this story. It's one of our old stories from an Ianliacht, from the, what they sometimes call the Fenian cycle of stories with Finn McCool. So Diarmid and Grania are characters there. So Diarmid was one of Fionn's right-hand men. You know, he was one of his finest warriors, but he was also a very beautiful man himself, a beautiful young man. And he had this love spot, they called it, Bal Sherka. And some kind of mark or something that really sent people crazy over him. So it's an interesting thing, Bal Sherka. It's hard to imagine, I suppose like a modern beauty spot or something, but it's some kind of embodiment of how beautiful and attractive this guy is, Diarmid. And Grania was a beautiful young woman who was betrothed, who was engaged to Fionn, who at this stage was getting older. He was a bit of an old man with a young bride-to-be, and then there's his young, handsome warrior who is guarding him. So as you can imagine, folks, it's the classic love triangle. And in old Irish stories, honor was a big thing which put people in a bind. But also people would have like magical taboos binding them too. So they just would have no choice but to do this thing. This was called a geis, Geis. This is like a kind of magical bind you're in, not just I should do this, but I have no choice. So this is the sort of thing that created a lot of drama in these old Irish stories. People really caught between two places. In a Veltana stocha, between two Mayfires. And what do Diarmid agus Grania do? But they take off, they go on the run. And then that's what the Toriacht about, because Toriacht, Diarmid agus Grania, means the pursuit of Diarmid and Grania. So Fionn and probably his other warriors were chasing after them, trying to find them. So that means that all around Ireland, in every corner, if there's a little flat rock or a little cozy space, people would say that's where Diarmid and Grania slept one night. You know, so there's a lot of places called Liaba Diarmid agus Grania, like their bed, all around the country, and every little region has a version that, oh yeah, they slept here one night when Fionn was chasing them, and maybe some other details to the story. So I'm not going to spoil the ending, but if you've been listening, you'll know that we don't always have happy endings in Irish stories and songs. So let you find that out for yourself. Toriacht Diarmid agus Grania. So it's a classic, and in some ways a little bit similar to the story of Deirdre. But I think the story of Deirdre is particularly dark, really. But classic love triangle. There's other stories with that dynamic as well. Emma, you've got something really interesting in a way that maybe people wouldn't expect. But Niall Vailintín Hain, and he has a bit of a connection to Ireland.
Tá Kinta. It's a bit of a fun fact. Perhaps this kind of fact now would come in handy in a pub quiz, in a table quiz or something like that. And we're very famous for, Naomh Pádraig agus Naomh Bríd, and people would think of Ireland and they're the saints that you'd have, but Niall Vailintín has a link there, and it's because part of his heart is actually in the country. It's in Lá Fhéile, it's in Dublin, and it came over in 1836, so it's in Ochtiog Truchas a Shea, and the Archbishop Murray of Dublin received it, I suppose you could say, and who gifted it was Pope Gregory the 16th to a Carmelite called John Spratt, and a piece den Cree Toshenish Strad Namrahrabana, so on Whitefriar Street in Dublin. Now, I've never been. I'm not that familiar with Dublin. I'm not a Dub myself, or I haven't ever lived there, but perhaps Anil Tá Curmachagut an áit in a Wilshe nu on Vacatú Rive. Did you ever actually see it?
It's just off Ainger Street, so it's one of the main thoroughfares on the south side of the city, quite central. So I've been past the church. I haven't been in. I could suggest to my partner that we go in as a lovely romantic visit to see,
you should have done some field research now for this, to be honest. There should have been a cut to a clip now of you in there.
I don't think she's that kind of gal. She might like something a bit nicer than ancient relics.
A piece of St. Valentine's heart. You can't get more romantic than that. And before we clicked recording, on this podcast, it's crazy to think that a piece of someone's heart has been moved around, and it was used as a gift. The same with Naomh Bríd, so St. Bridget, part of her skull was returned to Ireland, and I can only imagine, pieces of their bodies are all around the world, and would they ever, who knows, would they ever be brought back together at the end in years and years?
It was kind of big business, wasn't it, in the Middle Ages, in the medieval times, relics and things like that. And I think it's a bit like the Berlin Wall a few years ago. If you put all the pieces of the Berlin Wall back together, you'd have 17 walls.
That's the thing. And do you believe that it actually? I'm always a bit skeptical. Is it really? Even my grandmother had a piece of cloth that was apparently from Padre Pio. I'm always a little bit skeptical, but I believe that Pope Gregory gave it, and it's there. And I would, next time I'm at home in Asia, I think I will go in and see poor Niall Vailintín agus a Cree and son.
Yeah, well, I'll see how my partner feels about it, but she may not be too taken with this notion.
Do it as a surprise. Surprise her.
So on that surprisingly gothic note, we're going to wrap up now. Tasúlagin Gerwinship Sult as na Skeelta agus na PC show. We hope you really enjoyed these little tidbits about love and the Irish language. We had some shannuckles, some terms. We had songs and stories and poetry all about love. We're only touching the surface, of course. It's the tip of the iceberg. Agus tana milche oran agus danta agus gahradella. There's so many more if you dive in. But the part of the way to do that is to go to bitesize.irish, maybe take our 7-day challenge and move forward with your Irish learning journey. So a Gaeilge, gur míle maithagah, be muidir caint ríis go lua. Slán.
Slán go fóil.